Gonna give it just another minute or two. Let some more people join. I believe our chair and vice chair will be here today. I know it's a Friday morning, so it's hard to get started sometimes. Great to have you here. Give it a couple more minutes. There's Jen. Jen, good to see you.
Good morning.
How's everybody's day going so far?
Friday.
My favorite. All right, I was gonna give it just another minute or two, let a couple more people join, and then we can go ahead and get started. Right, I'll go ahead and share my screen and get the day rolling. Let's see here, can everybody see that okay? Perfect. Great. And with this, I will pass it over to you, Jen.
Good morning. Let's do a roll call. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 members. Jen, Katie, Scott, Hal, and Jess.
Yeah, so looks like we might have some more people join us a little bit later. I know Michelle is not going to be able to join today.
So with 5, do we have a quorum?
We do not.
Okay. Well, we can review the minutes. We just won't be able to approve them. Could you possibly scroll up just to see the bottom of the
Zoom out a little bit as
agenda?
well.
Perfect, thank you.
Of course. And yes, that it does lower the number for quorum, but we still haven't reached quorum without her. But thank you for double checking with that.
Any questions about the agenda or anything that needs to be added? From the public or other? Okay, January minutes.
Go ahead and drop this link in the chat for everybody. If you would like to review.
Give everybody a couple minutes to read over those. Did we have, oh, we didn't have a December, never mind, ignore me. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Adjustments? Okay,
Can I just real quick? I'm not certain that it's important, but I'm just not listed in the guests. Though I am in the body.
Yeah, for that call out. I will adjust that now. Oh, and it looks like Dr. Rice is joining us, so we should have reached quorum at this point.
yay.
And then there's James. So we are good to go.
Awesome. Good morning, Dr. Rice and James. Do you want to take a minute to read over the January minutes? And then if you have any questions or concerns, or if we can make a motion to approve, we'll give you guys a couple minutes.
I'll go ahead and drop the link in the chat again for the meeting minutes if anybody would like to take the time to look at that.
Geez, you need a motion still? I'll move to approve the minutes with the aforementioned addition of Kevin to the guest list.
Thanks, Scott.
I will second.
Right.
Okay, moving on to membership recruitment. I know last month we talked about our CDHS vacant seat. And I believe CDHS has a plan to hopefully fill that seat. I think I saw her on here. There she is, Samantha. Do you want to introduce yourself, Samantha?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha Garrett. I do a policy and budget work for the Office of Civil and Forensic Mental Health at CDHS. And I have been told that the department intends to appoint me to that seat, but I don't know that securing that appointment with the governor is anyone's priority in the executive branch this time of year. So who knows how long that'll be.
Samantha, I'm gonna go ahead and get in contact with you after this meeting, so we can kind of work together to see about getting appointments and things like that.
Awesome. And then I mean, I know this is public information, but when we send out the minutes, etc., can we include her yet, or does she have to officially be on the board?
Let's check with Ryan. I believe that we can include because it is public knowledge. So anybody is able to access that, and then everything's going to be uploaded on our public facing website anyways. So I don't see why I couldn't go ahead and CC you in those emails, but let me just double check to make sure and I will let you know. But great idea, Jen. Go ahead and get the ball rolling there.
Thank you. Getting an official calendar invite would be really helpful too.
Sure. And then it looks like some of the other seats that we're going to have open are families of persons with a mental health disorder, consumers of mental health services, the Department of Public Health and Environment, as well as children's healthcare facilities. So those are going to be some of the ones that we're going to be actively recruiting for. And I have worked with our communications team to go ahead and draft some language around recruitment, specifically for newsletter articles that we're looking to tap into, email campaigns that we're going to be sending out to you all to forward to your respective communities, and as well as social media campaigns. So we're going to be putting all of this information on LinkedIn, Facebook, and I believe Instagram. We're working on our Instagram profile right now. Somehow we got left out of it. So need to get that situated with Meta and them. But once we have that all up and running, all the information will be going out there and we'll be in our recruitment season in March. So I'll be sending out those emails for you to forward to your respected community members that way. We're going to be uploading a lot of the information on the BHA website as well as the MHAB website so people know how to go and apply to this council, kind of understand the purpose of this council and things like that. I did want to ask you all today, when thinking about these 4 seats, if there's like anybody that you would recommend that we reach out to, if there's any organization you recommend we reach out to, a newsletter that we could tap into, really kind of wanted to take a moment to hear your thoughts about how to kind of get some of this information out to these respective communities that we're trying to specifically recruit for.
And Galen, can you reiterate the particular positions you're trying to fill in?
And I'll drop them in the chat as well. So, excuse me, my allergies today are going crazy. So we have families of persons with mental health disorders, consumer of mental health services, the Department of Public Health and Environment, and then children's healthcare facilities.
Yeah, Darren, right off the top of my head, I think for the first 2, I would reach out to NAMI. If you haven't already, I think having they would definitely have, you know, and I know Colorado Springs has a chapter. I'm sure Denver has a chapter for NAMI, and get that message out across the state, because I know they work with families that advocate for persons living with mental health disorder and for individuals as well.
Thanks, James. And you said NAMI, like NOMI?
Yeah, I think it stands for National Alliance on Mental Illness or National Association of Mental Illness. I can't remember which. I know I should know that, and I'm sorry.
It's Alliance. Don't worry, James.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Perfect.
And I have I know of someone, is there like just a link that I could email? I have someone that I know is interested.
So we are like working to redirect like our link to be able to kind of describe this. But I'm gonna drop the application link in the chat for you, Dr. Rice. And then if you
Okay.
can just let that person know that on the drop down, they'll need to go down and specifically select this council and then just provide the full name of this council. But I will
Okay.
drop that link in the chat for you right now.
Okay. Thank you. And also we can hear you, but it's a little cutting in and out and soft. So
Sorry about that. Let me see if I can adjust some of my settings. Give me 1 second, everybody. Technology is great when it works. Is that any better? About the same?
about the same, yeah.
Let me see. Let me see if I can headphones today. Give me 1 moment, everybody. Sorry about this.
I wasn't the only one, right? It was same. Okay. All right.
No, very choppy. I mean, I could
Yeah.
understand.
I
what
can
you
make
were
it out,
saying,
but it was hard. It was hard.
Yeah.
Is this any better? Not yet.
Yeah, just keep going. We can follow you.
Okay. Let's see here. I'll just be sure to speak up a little extra loud. Okay, so
Wait. I'm so sorry to cut you off. And I'm just throwing an idea out there. Sometimes when I get like that, it's because the bandwidth in the building is low. If I shut off the video, sometimes the audio gets better. I don't know if you want to try that. Just a thought.
let's see it. You don't need to see me know what I look like. Is that any better for anybody? Maybe? Yeah.
It does seem a little bit better.
Okay, sorry about this, guys. Technology is great when it works, but my apologies. All right, so I see Kevin mentioned Colorado Mad Moms. Absolutely. Is there any other group that we're thinking of to reach out to?
Maybe to Children's Hospital specifically.
Okay, Children's Hospital.
Some people from Children's came and did a tour at Fort Logan last fall that I think might be in sort of the right area to be interested in this. I was on that tour with them. It was arranged through our legislative coordinators if it would be helpful to try and like reverse engineer how that contact was made.
That'd be great. And then Dr. Rice, here is the link for the application. All right. Well, if you think of any other organization or person that we should reach out to, definitely feel free to email myself or Jen and let us know so we can kind of get those emails and tap into those newsletters and things like that. All
I'll
right.
put my email in the chat as well.
Thanks, Jen. With that, I'm going to pass it back over to you, Jen.
All right, let's see. Transportation order draft review and recommendations. And do you have a copy of that you could pull up?
Yes.
Perfect.
Drop it in the chat as well.
Everybody a minute to look over that.
Caitlin, would you be able to drop that link into the chat? It's just small on my screen.
Yes, I believe I have. And is my sound any
Oh,
better?
there it is.
It's not. Darn. So I have it. Is this any better?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for hanging in there with me, everybody.
The only thing I thought of when reading this is maybe to mirror other statutory language, law enforcement shall utilize co-responders or crisis response if available. I forget what other sections that's in, but that would be the only thing that I thought of.
And Katie, is that in a specific spot or just like kind of throughout?
I think in that fourth paragraph, the mental health transport order may be directed to the sheriff or law enforcement. The sheriff or law enforcement may request assistance from mobile crisis. Do we want them to have to pull in mobile crisis if it's available? Is that a good idea?
So we do have precedent in other parts of 2765 where we could definitely add that. And I'm sorry, everyone, my brain is not working on this Friday morning. Can we please remind me, are we looking to propose this as a change to statute or just adding language to individual county courts orders? Like, could we incorporate this on an M form kind of a thing?
Jessica, I believe so. So this is just draft language when Judge Elizabeth Lace came to speak with us last
Right.
month. This is her draft that she is proposing for legislation.
Okay.
And so we kind of talked through it a little bit, and then she was able to provide it to us. And so now today we're just gonna kind of look over it and make any recommendations.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Have we had law enforcement weigh in yet?
No, we have not, but we do have Hal here today.
Curious what your thoughts are, Hal.
Yeah. So real quick, for those who don't know me, I'm a Littleton police commander and have been in law enforcement for 24 years now. And I oversee our co-responder program. And so I really do appreciate being a part of this conversation. We have a lot of meetings where we kind of talk about like kind of in the weeds hospital stuff that I have no idea how you guys do that stuff. So this is a topic that is very relevant to me, and I'm happy to help in any sort of way and answer questions. So I can start with my opinion, or we can talk about like different scenarios. What's the best way to kind of start this conversation?
So I think the issue we've run into for the past several years is we have patients who are court ordered, and anybody jump in if I'm way off base, but patients who are court ordered on an outpatient basis, so they're living in some sort of facility or in their residence, has a court order to take their medications and, attend their appointments with their outpatient provider, but don't either go into their appointment or don't take their court-ordered medication and are decompensating, and we need transportation to sort of force the medication. But we've run into issues with law enforcement either outside of their jurisdiction or, staffing wise, unable to provide that transportation.
Yeah. And so, like, just to help me out a little bit, like, this seems very close to the M4. What's the biggest differences here? Is that we're going in just for the transportation part?
I think it's for when someone's already under a certification where the M4 is initiating it. It's somebody's under an outpatient certification in Littleton, that like through All Health.
Yeah.
And I feel like most law enforcement waits until the person decompensates, until the person reaches M1 criteria again. And we try to avoid that by getting them in to get their medications before that.
Yeah.
And then, as I say, one of the biggest complaints we get is if the individual refuses to go voluntarily with a law enforcement officer, they are not fulfilling the orders of the court. We also have certain jurisdictions flat out saying they're just not going to do mental health pickups anymore because they no longer have qualified immunity.
Sure. Yeah. And we've had that discussion for a while now. That's been an ongoing issue with really any sort of mental health hold type of situation, especially when the liability piece started deteriorating for law enforcement. And so chiefs and sheriffs got nervous about that and started backing away from that. I can tell you we love court ordered stuff because it's a judge forcing us to do it. So the more a judge is going to say you shall do stuff, it makes it easier for us on a command level to say, well, this is what it is. When you start using the word should or may, you get into discretion, and then that discretion is going to say, we're going to play it safe and not do that. Or we're going to like minimize our risk and our liability in those situations. And so, the more that we're getting courts to say shall, the better we're going to have here as this group to say, like, we have to go do that. Just kind of preparing for this discussion, I kind of came up with 3 scenarios in my head. And so, if we get this form that says an officer shall go over there, and so then we're with our co-responders, scenario 1 is we go knock on the door and the 60-year-old woman answers the door, and we say, we have some court-ordered paperwork and we need to take you to a facility for you to get your treatment. And she says, okay. And we walk her out, and she goes into a private ambulance, a fire department ambulance, and she goes to the facility and she gets her treatment. And so in that scenario, everything worked out perfectly. And so what we're hoping for is that scenario all the time, and that's just not going to happen. So then take the same scenario, and she opens the door, and it's a police officer and a co-responder saying, hey, we've got to take you in for your treatment. And she says, I'm not going to go. And so the question is the law enforcement officer making the decision that I'm now going to enter her property without her permission? And it sounds like that this court order paperwork is going to say that's okay. Am I on the right track? So far, everyone head nodding. Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. Scenario 3 is she doesn't come to, she answers the door. I'm not letting you in. We go in. She starts resisting. Now officers are going hands-on, and she complains of an injury. And obviously that's not what anyone wants in any of this scenarios, but she's now saying that the officers assaulted her and she's getting a lawyer. Is this piece of paper saying that officer's not liable in any way, regardless of the injury? Because that's a big one. And the next scenario gets worse. So,
would it help? Would it help if it flat out said that?
It would help the officers because these things get so gray. I'll only speak for myself here, but I don't want to put a 60-year-old woman in an arm bar and take her to the ground. But if she's got a knife, that's what I'm going to do. And that would be the safest way to get her. And so the question is like, you start getting these rapidly evolving situations where I just want to make sure that this piece of paper is saying, whatever it takes for her to get her medication, that's what we're going to do. And again, I really hope that it's scenario 1 or 2, but like, we're going to run into a situation where someone doesn't want to do it and they're going to start defending themselves. And I want to make sure that the people who are in there, police officers, co-responders, firefighters, whoever's at the door going in there, I guess I just want to make sure that this is saying like everyone's protected from what could unfold. Now, hopefully we can get into, with our officers and we train them, as long as that the situation's not imminent, you use time, talk, and tactics to try to like play this out. But if we're talking about someone who's not taking court-ordered medications, I don't know the stability of this person we're talking to. And so, these scenarios get darker, and that's not the point, is to try to make these as scary as possible. But I hope this group can understand that there's going to come a point in time where the person's not going to voluntarily come with us. And I guess I'm so sorry that I missed that last meeting, because I would want to hear from this judge. I don't know if there's such a word as blanket immunity for police. It's just these scenarios go so sideways so quickly sometimes that you're going to try to articulate what happened. And I don't know if we get the benefit of the doubt anymore. And so you're going to have chiefs and you're going to have city attorneys saying, we're going to be very hesitant to open that door. I could see police departments saying, well, yeah, you can go knock on the door with a co-responder and see if they'll answer. And if they answer, say, hey, you got to come do this. But I think it's going to take a really strong chief or sheriff to say, okay, go ahead and, and take down that door, if you will. It just opens up such a different conversation and fraught with liability. I see a lot of digital hands. So I clearly stirred up something. I'm totally for any sort of comment or question.
How would that be different from an M1? So obviously you mentioned imminent. So if you get a call from this 60-year-old woman's son, let's say, that lives with her, and he said that she's threatening him,
Yep.
and that's how you get the call versus this pickup order, how you respond in those two situations different as far as your like liability and
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I would need to ask some other questions, but if he's there at the residence saying my safety's in jeopardy, it's going to allow us to go in there to protect him. If he's saying, my mom's threatening me and she's got a knife, or, whatever scenario, however we want to do it. If he's articulating I'm in harm's way, the law is going to say that we can go in there and keep him as safe as possible. And that's a fantastic scenario that you're describing here. I would say, to make it even more confusing, is when we have these M1 capabilities, but he or she is not an active harm to somebody else. We get suicide calls where you have to make this determination. Are we going to go in there into a residence to save themselves from themselves? And that's a much harder conversation. But if there's a third person who says I'm in harm's way, there's a lot of green lights for us to be able to protect a third person.
so playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Let's just say this person clearly at some point was a danger to themselves or others, the person with the pickup order, because they're on a certification
Sure.
for the last 9 months, let's say. And assuming the provider that wrote the petition gave historical information, maybe, so kind of jumping between the two scenarios, this exact scenario did happen 3 months ago when the petition was sent and this person was hospitalized, they stabilized, now they're back at home, but that legal paperwork from the provider saying, 3 months ago, the 60-year-old woman threatened her son who lives with her. I don't know how, I'm not articulating this right, but because it's not an imminent situation, is that what makes it different?
Yep, that's exactly. The only difference there is that the one that you're describing was 3 months ago and she's not doing it in that moment. What it does show is that she has the capability, and I don't mean to keep saying she, it can be a he, it can be a grandpa, or a dad. But yeah, that person is currently doing the situation, which causes us the ability, it gives us the ability to actively respond and stop that, and stop the put the Band-Aid on the situation, if you will, versus saying 3 months ago she did that. It'll show that she's capable of doing it again, which would help us. But it's not going to meet the threshold of the active threat.
Gotcha. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, no, good question.
This is James. I just had a follow-up question on the immunity piece. My understanding is that the qualified immunity pretty clearly provided protection prior to implementation of the Law Enforcement Officer Accountability Act. And then after the passing of the Law Enforcement Officer Accountability Act, we saw a dramatic position change from multiple law enforcement agencies across the state, because if you're deemed to have violated that person's civil rights in any way, shape, or form, then you lose the qualified immunity. And that just created a huge gray area. So I wonder if instead of just blanket immunity in this case, I wonder if adding language saying that if conducting this or in the action or while conducting this or this action will not be deemed a violation of the person's civil rights.
Yeah,
that might fix that piece. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, fantastic thoughts and questions there. Yeah, you're 100% right that once the officers became personally liable, everything changed. Because at one point, and I never want our officers to make mistakes here or bad decisions, but when the officers were doing that, the city was being liable and they were cutting a check. And I don't want to make it sound like that money isn't as important, but it was a lot easier to write for a city to write a check saying like, let's drop this thing, versus the officer personally having to be financially responsible, and they're going to have a lot less assets available to make that settlement. So you're 100% right on that first point. Yeah, the more, and I guess we keep using the word immunity. I think that's so blankety, but yeah, the more protections you can give the department and the officer, the better this is going to go for each agency. And I just don't know if a court or a board is going to be able to say you can do whatever you want, because you get scenario A where everything goes fine, but then the worst case scenario is people are someone got dramatically hurt or even killed, and then people are going to ask a lot of questions and saying, well, is that group or is that officer really 100% protected after they made a decision that could be viewed as questionable? I think that's where you start running into the hard parts. But to your point, the more protections you can tell the police department they're going to get, the stronger this is going to look.
And then if I can follow up one more point, I know that there's a late bill. It may have already been introduced, but it's in the process of being introduced, and it sounds like it's got good traction that might make this bill moot. My understanding is it's a change to the use of force that allows and creates language for the use of force specifically for to the minimum amount necessary to bring someone into custody when they're experiencing a behavioral health event. So, and I think it even speaks to not just M1 holds, but for long-term holds as well. I just throw that out there to say, hey, there might be another way to skin this cat.
Gotcha.
Scott, it looks like you have your hand up.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love this conversation. I mean, I think real quickly, Jen, to your point about what's the difference between this and the M1, I mean, my sense practically, and I, would love to be corrected if I'm wrong. I mean, there are different entry points to who can write that in this, so that like the initiation process is different. And I'll say that in my experience, the M1s are treated very differently, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, even sometimes precinct to precinct, who feels comfortable doing what. So I think there is a role for something like this, standardizing the approach. And how I really appreciate your thought as far as using that may language. I don't know if these are sort of lawyerly questions. I'm not a lawyer. Is there a reason to prioritize who responds, saying, hey, is law enforcement on the hook if none of these other people are available, or some prioritization? And then my final thought is, I agree on the concerns for liability. I mean, I'm highly sympathetic to these scenarios and the law enforcement officers who are executing the warrant. And also the idea of like some blanket immunity just doesn't sit well with me, and I don't think would sit well with a lot of people. There's something weird about the behavioral health space. I don't know, like at what point it's like, oh, this behavioral health order is different than other far riskier things we do all the time. And I don't know, do you reference other legislation or language? Like there seems like there's got to be some kind of legal solution that, like, I don't know how behavioral health got caught up in this carved out weird example. But
Yeah, I think what's so hard about this is that no one's committed a criminal act here, but the law enforcement is taking one of the most pivotal roles, which is getting the person from A to B. And so, when someone commits a crime, we're pointing to the statute saying you broke this law and that's why you're going to go to A to B. But like, there's a lot of like, well, it's not this person's fault that they're suffering from this. And then, but they're not doing what we need them to do. So it's a medical call, but because of the risk of people getting hurt, we're going to put officers in their tools. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, like the only reason we're there is because of the tools on our belt to where we can force the situation to happen. And that's when things start going awry, is when the person that we're trying to take into custody is going to fight back on that. And then we have to rise to a different level of force. And that's, so you're 100% right. What's so hard about this is that there's not a criminal aspect to this. This is really, and I don't want to call it medical, but like, it's very not policey. And I keep using policey. That can't possibly be a word, but, so yeah, that's hard. We're kind of the security agents, if you will. This would be a whole different story if they were saying that firefighters and paramedics are going to go in there. Way less concern for liability, just because of the use of force is going to be way down there. But I mean, we're happy to help in this realm. I think another part of that section of that order that we were talking about talks about that, law enforcement can transport these people. And I think that would be a last case scenario for us to put somebody with a mental health condition in handcuffs in the back of a cop car. It's such a negative, thing. Like it feels less medical now that they're going back into a police car, unsupervised. I get it that they're not going to be a danger to the officer because of the handcuffs, but like there's no medical treatment being provided in that ambulance. And then I think with a lot of these situations, if we get into this sort of, I could see us returning to this person, and now they've had this negative experience where they basically got arrested. So they're going to be less cooperative on a future encounter. And are they going to be more combative? Are they going to be ready for this second one where now it's they've armed themselves or they're ready for this situation to come. And now, now the situation's escalated. And I hate to say it, but like media has not been our friend. And now it's going to look like we've been there 5 times. The first 4 went great, but now this 5th one is unfolded. And why didn't they do something on the 4th one or the 3rd one? And so there's a lot of Monday quarterbacking that's going to look bad for law enforcement, even though we can articulate it later as to all the reasons. But like, it just gets so dark so quickly for us on these situations. But, the whole idea is to keep everyone safe. I would hope most law enforcement officers would understand that keeping the co-responders and the paramedics and the firefighters who are trying to do that keeping them safe is just as important as the patient. So we want to be there to keep everyone safe. It's just that when these things go downhill, it tends to fall on us because we're the ones using the force. And then that takes a lot of accountability and report writing and body cam footage to articulate why we did what we did. And so the whole thing, I could understand a chief or a sheriff being like, this is too gray. But, the more shalls you get in there, the better for us. Yeah, no, this is a great conversation. Please, if I can answer anything else.
Looks like we have Kevin and then Dr. Rice.
Hi, Hal. Thank you so much, and great to hear from you. I'm coming to this from the perspective of the Behavioral Health Task Force and the Crisis Systems Subcommittee, where we're also talking about this issue. And so I'm really excited to hear the conversation because we haven't started this conversation yet in our group. And I'm looking at the text that's here, and it says the sheriff, law enforcement agency, sheriff's deputy, law enforcement agency, again, mobile crisis personnel, paramedics, emergency medical technicians, or secured transportation provider, a long list, shall not be held liable in the execution of the terms of the mental health transport order. And I'm wondering if that feels like that satisfies it, or if you could clarify that statement to make it more useful to law enforcement. What would it say, or what could it say better? And I'll stop there for now.
Yeah. Well, and the first thing I want to make sure is that language you just read from, that includes the whole call, or is that just the transportation of it? Like if something were to go wrong,
It says, yeah, it's
the whole.
I apologize for interrupting.
No, good.
It says it shall not be held liable in the execution of the terms of the mental health transport order.
Okay.
So I think it's like a following the court order and the terms of whatever the court order is, assuming that would be kind of uniform across the state.
Yeah, I think the question that I would want answered from someone much higher than me is, are you sure anything we do is going to be okay? I mean, I'm going to use the word anything. And and so I'm just saying, like, having been a supervisor for 15 years, I have officers who make mistakes. And some mistakes are recoverable and it's a teaching moment, and some are more dramatic. And so I guess my question is, if an officer were to do something and they, if someone were to say, hey, that was a little too much, are we going to point to a sheet that says, well, we're covered? And if that's the case, that you're going to get a lot of support from law enforcement. The problem is something's going to go wrong somewhere, where someone's going to go to the news saying this was too much. And then someone has to stand there and saying, well, we gave blanket immunity to these situations, and someone's going to say that was inappropriate. So I can't imagine they're going to say anything we choose to do is going to be okay. I want my officers to make the right decisions. But in rapidly evolving situations, that there can be opinions on what should have been done.
Yeah.
And so
and mistakes get made too.
Say that again, sir?
And mistakes get made too, no matter who shows up. No matter who shows up.
And it's and you said that 100% right. Like, what's the intent behind that mistake? Was it just, I had to choose from 4 things and this was what I thought at the time and I had a millisecond? Or, could someone view that as I made a poor decision because I have a belief system about something? Yeah, definitely a totally different conversation. But I think there's going to need to be someone higher than us saying, like, yes, you're good to go. We haven't even talked about all the scenarios so far. Is we've come in through an open door. Are we going to force open a window? Are we going to force a door? We're getting close to SWAT call territory here. And so, what we've done in Littleton with these M4s is we have a special enforcement team. And once we get that M4, we try to put eyes on them and we try to get the person outside of their residence. So once they're walking to a car, we're trying to do that there, where instead of like having to force something in a home or an apartment where we don't know the layout as well as they do, and less access to weapons, hopefully. So yeah, I mean, the question is like, how bad does the court want this person? If we know they're inside, are we going to force our way in there? A lot of police departments are going to say, I don't want an officer getting shot over this. And, there's a lot of people with weapons inside their own residence. And, if people start getting hurt on these calls, it's going to get a lot of publicity really quick. And so, yeah, it's a fantastic question. The more, if someone from high up says we're getting a ton of protection here, you're going to get more buy-in from the officers.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, good question. Yeah.
This isn't my question, but before I get to my question, with this, that sentence that was just highlighted, would that be a place where it would help to have James's language around action will not be deemed a violation of the patient's civil rights, something like that? I don't know if that really, I don't know if that changes any of that, but just a thought off the top of my head.
Yeah. We'll
yeah.
take as much language and protections as possible. So
Okay.
we're not immune to extra paperwork here. And so, if there wants to be more paragraphs with more protections, we'll take that every day.
Yeah. Okay, well, Hal, I have a question for you. Like, these are not, I'm talking here just about certifications and not M1s.
Okay.
I mean, the patients we have on certification are the sickest of the sick. Like they will not eat for weeks to the point they will die, or their behaviors become so problematic, they will do something bad and land in jail.
Yep.
I'm just wondering, so, I think sometimes behavioral health, like on the one hand, I absolutely don't want to stigmatize it, but like sometimes behavioral health isn't really seen as a medical emergency. Like, tell me what you would do if this was someone that you knew was in danger of having a medical emergency. What would you do? I mean, I think the difference is going to be like you potentially don't have someone fighting you back, but like, in terms of would you break into the house? Like, what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd want a specific scenario, but I guess my question would be, are they actively doing it right now? So I've gone to a handful of calls in my career where someone says that they're going to kill themselves, they're going to slit their wrists. And so the question is are we going to kick down their own door to get to them to slash their wrists? And I can tell you, in my experience, if they haven't done it yet, we're going to continue talking and not force the issue.
I think so. And I've done many, many certifications over my career. I don't think, and I'm not saying it's not possible, I don't think once I've had a patient on a certification because they are at risk of harming themselves.
Oh.
The people that get on these certifications are usually the folks that have very bad psychotic illnesses. They have no insight into what's going on. The danger is usually to someone else, to some community altercation where they get hurt, they go to jail, or the grave disability. That's really where I've seen it. Like, these people will decompensate to the point of death, because of their mental illness, because they have lack insight. So, it's hard because, if you've already, from my perspective as a psychiatrist, if you have already gone through all the things we get to and they're on a certification and they're not following it, like that's like as bad as it gets in our world.
Yep.
But even then it's hard because it's like, if they are gravely disabled, are they going to die in an hour? Are they going to die in 3 days? Like you don't know that.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part of like, well, how bad does it have to get before you intervene? So, I'm just trying to think a little bit more like, if this was more medicalized, so to speak, would that change any of your behaviors?
No, a fantastic question. Yeah, what you're suggesting, this gravely disabled, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like, how far is too far to say, okay, we're going to force our way in there? Gravely disabled, and we look through a window and the person is unconscious on the floor, we're going to kick in that door. Gravely disabled, and we knock on the door and they say, I'm fine, go away, we're probably not forcing that issue as much. So yeah, the urgency is huge for us. And you hit on something earlier that I wanted to touch back on. You said it really well, that some of these threats are to other people. If it's not an imminent threat, it makes it really hard for us. Vague threats, stuff like that, you start getting into a freedom of speech sort of thing. And so the question is, if they say they're going to do it, I'm going to come over there and beat you up. Or I'm, maybe you have better examples, but like, just telling the other person that they're going to do it is going to be hard for us to somehow involuntarily hold them.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for others, and I think this is where it gets really tricky, is like everyone has a different threshold for putting people on certification.
Right.
But, if I were to do it because of danger to others, there absolutely will have been a history of something already happened. Something already, and probably multiple times. So it's not like there's very much a history that this could happen. It's not just they're saying it. Like, that would never be enough to get someone on a certification, at least the way I do them. And I think the way most people do. So, again, it's hard because I can't guarantee that someone isn't on a certification when they shouldn't be, right?
Right.
But, you know, I guess the whole point of my whole discussion right now is I do wonder sometimes, you know, if law enforcement takes this as seriously because it's a mental illness and it's just more nebulous, you know, as seriously as they would take other medical conditions, you know, and I'm just trying to say it doesn't get any worse in our business, you know, so that's all. Yeah.
And can I ask you a question? When you guys, when a clinic is writing the M1, like we've had this at All Health before, we'll get sent some paperwork from All Health saying like, hey, we put this person on a cert. And if I'm using the wrong language, please correct me. But like, we'll get this paperwork that a clinician or a therapist has been like, yeah, we need them for an M1. And here's some reports based on what's happening in some of the counseling sessions or meetings. That for a law enforcement agency holds so much less weight than a judge saying, come bring this person to a facility. Right. You know, we don't know this therapist. We don't know the background and the teaching. And honestly, I'll be the first one to say it. Like, I don't know the different ranks or levels of the clinical care stuff. So when a certain person fills out this sheet, I don't know if that's a doctor or, you know, an assistant. And I don't know if that should or shouldn't hold more weight for us, but you start putting yourself like, am I really going to go try to force this M1 or stuff for a person, you know, for I don't want to say a private practice, but, you know, a third party, not the court system.
Well, I mean, maybe that actually, I mean, I think M1s, there's a tremendous amount of variability, but a certification shouldn't have that. And it's always going to have the court involved, and certifications can only be done by MDs and PhDs. So, you know, I don't know, I'm talking to the group now. I mean, is this maybe, do we put a differentiate, like, is this where we start? Do we say for certifications? So we are talking the most severe of all these cases. Do we just really try to focus in on language for certifications as kind of a first step? I mean, I actually would have a problem with some of the, you know, there are definitely some really serious M1s and you need to get in there, but like there's such variability with who puts people on holds and like the situations. It's almost like I wouldn't necessarily want to give blanket or whatever we're calling it immunity to police to do that, because I think a lot of times the M1s are not probably rise to that level. So just a thought. Maybe we look more at certification specifically.
And if I can jump in, this proposed statute does apply to certifications only in the first paragraph. It's when someone's under a short-term, long-term.
Yeah, I see it now. Thanks. Yeah.
And that's something. I mean, the whole point of these orders, knowing Judge Leaf pretty well, is to avoid people decompensating to the point where there is an exigent circumstance that you can go in. And that's why we need them to go take their medications before they decompensate to that point. I'm wondering if maybe in these pickup and transport orders, it's clear that on such and such a date, the court put this person under a certification and found that they're gravely disabled, so that it kind of takes that discretion away from the law enforcement, so that they see the court's already found this person to currently be gravely disabled in the community. Would that be helpful? I don't know what would be helpful to prevent decompensation.
I just want to mention really quick, some of the verbiage you're using, Katie, where like the courts found them to be gravely disabled. The courts don't make that finding. That all goes back to the professional person. Basically what happens is the courts like agree to the certification, but they're not the ones making that finding. And it's not always a grave disability that puts them on a long-term or a short-term cert.
Yeah, I'm aware. I guess I'm thinking of when someone, the court, I guess, orders that they're under a certification, because even when a certification is just filed and there's no hearing requested, it becomes a court order under some other statute that I can't think of right now. So maybe the court ordered that they're under certification due to grave disability, danger to self, danger to others, or something like that, so that it takes away, just so that it's on there in some fashion to help law enforcement know that the court has made this finding prior to them having to make that finding in the field. Or, sorry, I'm using improper language.
No, and I think, so like the actual M form that we would help create, should we get this like through legislation, like we can absolutely put all of that information on there, and I think that would be helpful.
I was asking if that helps law enforcement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll take as much language from a court as possible. I honestly, the more I think about this, the more I think law enforcement needs to be trained more on what a certification is. Because the fact that I'm asking 5 questions and I'm a part of this board is going to speak volumes as to the people who, you know, don't keep up on this stuff. And so I think to learn just how dramatic a certification is would help go a long way to like, look, this is like the end of the road for us on a clinical level. Like there's no further stuff, whereas we're looking at it as that M1 type, get them to a local. And so, and I totally agree with you, Karen, like the M1 variability is outrageous. It's easier to put someone on an M1 than to arrest someone on probable cause, 10 times easier. So yeah.
That's a great point. We do not educate law enforcement about what certifications are. And maybe that alone would just change people's perception of this whole process.
It would help to show just how much it took to get to a certification. Because what we're thinking is that on the clinical level, someone's just kind of, I don't want to say willy-nilly, but writing the M1 like we write the M1, like a couple paragraphs here, danger to themselves or others, and we're done. So like the fact that to show the hoops that you guys are having to go through to get to a certification is like, wow, that took 17 different, you know, meetings and failure to follow these rules and or recommendations. That would go a long way for us to be like, hey, they have some skin in the game and they've put in a lot of the work before it got to us. That goes a long way instead of just filling out a piece of paper and faxing it to us and saying, can you go pick up this person for us? That holds more gravity. You know, it also helps us to have outside agent partners coming with us to these calls. You know, if the fire department is also with us, that shows that it's not just, sometimes we feel like a taxi, if you will, like, hey, we need this and we know you're driving around. So would you mind just stopping at this house and picking this person up? Like, it means more to us when other people are like, hey, we're going to meet you there and we'll try to do this together. That, you know, that's an hour out of your day as well. It does mean more to us when there's other people who are like, hey, this is important. And so I'm also taking the time versus, hey, I know the cops are just driving out there. You know, would you mind doing this for us? And so I know that we're going to start off being the focal point on some of these calls, but it should quickly transition to the paramedics or, you know, I would really push back against putting these people in a cop car once we make contact. I think that would be the biggest one for me, is like, that is a last case scenario that now we're going to literally treat them like a criminal. And I would expect future calls at this residence if we've already gotten to the certification. And so like, I want as much positive experience with law enforcement in case there's future calls.
Just Hal, just so you know, and I absolutely agree with you on the handcuffs. People use handcuffs so liberally with our patients right now, even when they're on M1 holds. It's like completely inappropriate. There's even some ambulance drivers that are like, we will not transport unless they're in handcuffs. I mean, it's ridiculous. But
Well, and everyone just turned into officer safety, right? And so we took away the human component because too many people were getting hurt. Or we didn't search the person well enough. And so instead of taking the 5 minutes to do a thorough search, if you take away their hands, you know, there's a 99% chance they're not going to hurt you. And so it's very easy to put on a pair of handcuffs. And I don't say that we do it inappropriately, but we throw them on much quicker than we did 20 years ago. Yeah. Yep. Totally fair.
Do you have a proposed avenue to initiate this training on certifications?
Off the top of my head, I mean, you know, every 3 to 4 months we have our updates from our co-responders. At least Littleton does, and I think the co-responder program continues to expand. You know, if it's possible to reach the co-responder groups and have them provide the updated training on what a certification is and just some of this terminology, that would be great. If there's something at the state level, but I just think, are we talking going agency to agency? Are we talking You know, that's a big ask to try to teach all of law enforcement. Is this a post thing? We can go through Colorado Post.
We have attempted to go through Colorado Post. We have a trainer, we have a team of trainers, and the most Post has been able to offer was like just a 15-minute overview of the services we offer.
Okay.
But if there's a way that we could get in there, that would be great. I mean, I don't have it easily handy, but we do have one trainer that like specifically focuses on law enforcement.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, are we looking for this to be some sort of like required education on a yearly basis? I mean, right? Who's going to say no to that? So, you know, is that another online class? Is that another, you know, I mean, which is all better than what we're doing now. So I'm not knocking that at all. But that's a great question. How would you get this out there to teach law enforcement just exactly what the difference? Is there a level before certification? What is that level? I mean,
The M1 and the M4.
yeah. And in my experience, the M4 is gaining a little more ground. You know, I think the first part when the M4 came out is everyone said absolutely not. I think the thing is with the M4s is that like our latest M4 was this person who just called us 1 million times a day. And it was easier to go do the M4 than to push back against the M4 and just let these phone calls just keep coming. And so that's when we put our special enforcement team to kind of wait for her to walk to her car. And then we were able to get her to where she needs to be. But in my experience, the M4 is slowly starting to gain traction in law enforcement, that the co-responders make law enforcement aware of it and then teach us a little bit about what this is and why this is different and what that looks like. And so from Littleton's perspective, at least, the M4 is more common knowledge now than ever before. But it's slow.
Jumping to the next question for you. Sorry to put you on the spot for this entire meeting.
No.
Do you have any thoughts, I guess, on the jurisdictional issue? So a patient who's certified in Denver and on the street in Arapahoe County, who does the pickup order and how do we get them to where they need to be?
Yeah, so they don't live in Denver, but the certification came from Denver?
Yeah, or vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, the more jurisdictions you get involved, the harder this is going to get, no doubt. This is a question that's beyond me, but like, are you guys aware of CCIC and NCIC?
Yeah.
Okay, it's the databases where we're going to run people and see if they have warrants.
Right.
Is any of this possible to be entered into CCIC, NCIC, where it would actually, I don't want to say look like a warrant, but would have the feel of, you know, the computerized version of like, oh yeah, this is requiring me to hold them. Is that, I have no idea how difficult that would be or if that's even an option, but like, we gain a lot of ground when we're running people on CCIC and NCIC and dispatch says there's a hit and then, okay, well, what is that hit? Okay, it's a required, you know, M4 hold or something like that. I mean, I don't know how difficult that would be, but versus like these pieces of paper you're getting pushed to at roll call being like, hey, when you get a chance, can you pick this person up?
Right. I don't think it's a terrible idea, but I have no idea what that would look like in practice or who would even be responsible.
I know a person I can reach out to for that question. However, she's out of town next week, so I can get with her, not this Monday, but the following Monday. But I can ask what that would look like. You know, people get a little nervous to just dump everything into CCIC, NCIC, but it sounds like we're getting to the point where this might be important enough and a strong enough push.
Katie, did you have a thought on that?
Yeah, just that I worked on the extreme risk protection orders so that I know for a fact that law enforcement can't see if they're under a cert. And I think there's some higher up laws and reasoning behind why we don't want law enforcement to know that you have a mental health hold. But maybe moving in that direction would be a good thing. I don't know the pros and cons.
That's true. I know even our own attorney generals aren't allowed to see that information.
Ah, boy, yeah.
Well, this has been an incredible discussion. I feel like it's going to come up more and more and more. I know since I've been in both my position and on this board, it's come up at least annually, if not more. But that being said, we only have 20 minutes left. Do we want to put a pause on this and go back to our agenda.
I did want to ask if you think that it would be beneficial to get Judge Leaf back into this meeting to have some additional follow-up conversations and kind of review some of these recommendations that you all made today live with her.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would,
Perfect.
and that was my fault for missing the last meeting. So if that judge wants to reach out to me specifically, I'd be happy to do one-on-one or be a part of the next meeting. I mean, yeah, that would be great for that.
Absolutely. I'll go ahead and reach out to her and see her availability and if we can get her at the March meeting.
Okay.
Well, with that, looks like we have Ryan Templeton on to provide us with some budget and legislative updates.
Good morning, Mental Health Advisory Board. So Ryan Templeton, Legislative and Governmental Affairs Division Director with the Behavioral Health Administration. Fantastic discussion we just had. The one thing I will ask is let's continue to have this moving forward and getting some words on pages to kind of take that next step. I'm coming up on 10 years at the state, and this Mental Health Advisory Board has been the whole time of my state existence. So I want to continue to see the movement to really make those changes to kind of making sure that the people of Colorado continue to have better access to service delivery. Commander Mandler, thank you for the back and forth there and kind of adding that law enforcement perspective that I think is so important in this process. So thank you for that and that discussion that I was able to listen into as well.
Yeah. No, if anyone has more questions about the law enforcement side of this, please ask. You guys have such great conversation, but so many of them have no relevance to law enforcement. I feel so useless in some of these like admin hospital type conversations. So please, if I can help with any of this, thanks for having me.
With the legislative updates, right, we talked last time or a couple times now is that session started January 8th. We're on day 52 of 120 if anyone's counting, right? So May 7th is the last day, May 8th is the celebration day that it's over, and then it's implementation time. With that, a big thing coming up for us at the Behavioral Health Administration is our figure setting is scheduled for March 11th. It was originally scheduled for March 4th. It has moved to March 11th. So that is not this coming Tuesday, but the Tuesday after. What that means is that's when the Joint Budget Committee makes their decisions about funding for the Behavioral Health Administration. So that's a big day for us. And with this being so late in the session, there isn't a whole lot of time for comebacks based on the decision. So it's going to be a quick turnaround about what we hear from JBC making the decisions about budget, which includes very specific about line items, about program funding, even about personnel there. And then we have the ability, or departments have the ability to provide comeback saying, hey, you should reconsider this. There's not a whole lot of time with that, as the long bill package that includes all of the recommendations is supposed to be introduced in the Senate on March 24th, which Colorado Constitution requires a balanced budget. The last forecast, if folks have been listening, was we are now at about a $1.2 billion deficit. So there has to be a lot of cuts across all departments. So if you're interested in that, March 11th is our figure setting, which we will be very closely watching. Last month we talked about a few bills. One being Senate Bill 9, which was the recognition of tribal court orders. Nothing has changed within this. This is still not scheduled. It has been assigned to Senate Judiciary. It is not on the calendar as of yet. That's the one that requires various state agencies to recognize and enforce tribal court orders, including behavioral health commitment orders, the mental health holds piece to that. So, and it adds a new section to 2765 as 2765-132. So we'll make sure that we keep a close eye on that and see what movement looks like if that does eventually come up. Things that are not scheduled after being introduced fairly early. I mean, obviously that's the behind the scenes work about trying to get to a better spot across agencies. We are not actively engaged in this one outside of we're watching it closely, but depending on potential amendments to where they're at once it does go through or get scheduled at Senate Judiciary. Another one that we talked about a lot is competency in criminal justice services and bail. That's Senate Bill 41. It passed Senate Judiciary. It's currently waiting in Senate Appropriations. There's a fiscal note attached to that. So until the long bill and it gets settled, things aren't moving through Senate Appropriations that have a fiscal component to it. There were some changes in Senate Judiciary specific to 2765. There's a clarification that folks that were found incompetent to proceed moving through the short-term certification, that process from the last couple of years is a clarification that those individuals can then go from short-term certification to long-term certification. I think there was a perception that that is the case. This is just clarifying that is the case. That is the flow and process for individuals that go from short-term certification to extended short-term certification to the long-term care and treatment, or what we've coined as long-term certification. So making sure that there is that flow and process for those individuals that get into the short-term certification process there. There may be some additional amendments to this, as competency feels like it comes up every single year, and there's pretty massive shifts in what that looks like. So we'll keep a close eye on that one as well. And then the last couple here, Senate Bill 42, got to see our one and only James McLaughlin in committee for that one. That's the behavioral health crisis and response recommendations. Made a whole bunch of changes to that, wiped out the fiscal note, so it moved through the Senate and is scheduled for March 11th in House and Human Services. What it ended up doing for 2765 specifically, it adds language to the 2765-106 about discharging individuals on holds and ensuring that in order to get off of a hold, the person needs to actually no longer meet the requirements of the hold. So they're trying to get around or make sure that folks aren't just being discharged when they still need the support that involuntary care provides. It struck the changes that were to 2765-131, the data reporting requirements, including that as the part of the data reporting for reason for discharge. That was driving some of the fiscal note for that as well, which it got to a no fiscal impact, even with BHA required to do a report about reimbursement shortages and gaps within the crisis response system and reimbursement and funding options, including treatment in place. So there was the date changed to January 1, 2027. That report is required, and we are going to rely on our behavioral health administrative service organizations, as that is also a requirement of them to address full system requirements that includes crisis response as well as treatment in place. So we're excited about that. Really talking about what does reimbursement shortages and gaps to system kind of supports BHA's role in that. Public safety also has to convene a virtual alternative response stakeholder group that does a similar approach to co-responder programs and alternative response models there, which making it virtual was a no fiscal impact or no cost as well. So that's why that is moving through. There is no fiscal note associated with that, so it made it through appropriations that way. Last one here, as we talked about last month a little bit too, is House Bill 25-1070. That's the electroconvulsive treatment for minors. That did pass the House. It is not scheduled in Senate Health and Human Services yet. It really changes the requirements for minors receiving ECT and establishes a process for it. It clarified what the objection to receiving ECT was. There's a whole long piece. So if you look at the bill language now, it's more streamlined related to hey, it's still two physicians that have to make that determination of need, as well as receive parental consent for minors as well. So those are 4 bills that we're watching closely. We'll make sure that within the minutes, BHA's bill dossier gets included in there. As a reminder, things you get within advisory boards are yours to review and keep and do with whatever you see fit, share or otherwise, because this is a public meeting. Any sort of questions that I can answer? Hearing none, Jen, Chair, I'll kick it back to you.
All right, thank you for all those updates. Caitlin, if you want to pull up our list of running recommendations. Perfect, thank you. So we spent a lot of today's meeting on the pickup orders.
Hey, just a quick question for the chair. This is James McLaughlin. If I hop off a little bit early, are we still going to have a quorum? I'm not going to mess anything up, am I?
I can answer if you want, Jen. No, you'll be good to go, James.
Okay, I'm sorry that I have to take off a little bit early, everybody. I want to echo what's already been said. That conversation was, it was amazing. It was very enlightening in a lot of ways, and I really appreciate having that voice from law enforcement as part of our team. I think that's a huge benefit to the entire process. So, thank you, everybody, and have a safe day and a good week.
Yeah.
All right, so any other questions or updates on our running list? I think it looks pretty good. If we want to go back to, there we go, perfect, thank you. Any questions from the public for the council? Or from members?
If I may, Jen, I did just want to let everybody know that I did just put the public questionnaire and feedback form in the chat. That is also linked to our council's website under resources. So if at any point in time you have a member of your community or a member of the public, or you yourself have a question that you're like, I want to discuss this with the council, or I need a little bit of feedback, but you just need to kind of get it out on paper. This is a great resource for you all to utilize. And then we'll just keep working through our executive subcommittee meetings once we start getting some responses to either bring these up to the council as a whole or be able to provide responses. So please just kind of like bookmark this page and feel free to utilize it and share it with all of your respected community members. So that way we can just get additional feedback on, kind of what's going on in the community. We can track trends and questions and things like that. So definitely please utilize and feel free to share.
This is awesome. And then you'll come back with some of the questions, if any are submitted.
Yes, so once we get some questions submitted, we'll review them in the executive subcommittee meeting. And for example, if we start seeing like a lot of questions around like M1 holds and things like that, we can definitely say, hey, we had 4 questions about M1 holds. Let's designate, a council meeting to kind of reviewing this information live. We can reach back out to those people to let them know that we're going to be reviewing that information live. We could also, utilize this to direct people to get some additional resources and things like that. So yes, we're going to be looking at this in the executive subcommittee meeting first, and then we'll be bringing it to the council as a whole as deemed fit by that subcommittee.
Perfect, thank you. All right, last but not least, March's meeting is scheduled to be in person at the BHA office. I know last time it was in the mountains, and you, Caitlin, sent out sort of a questionnaire to see who was going to go in person so that we could sort of plan ahead.
Yes, and I will be doing the exact same thing for this meeting. It will have a detailed map to kind of show you exactly where we're located at. When you type in 710 South Ash Street, it will take you kind of around to the back of the building. So I'll show you exactly, where we're at. I'll send out that form probably next week. So if you can just kind of let us know if you're going to be planning to attend either in person or hybrid, that would be great, just so we can kind of get an estimated head count there. And yeah, we really hope to see everybody in person. I know that we love having these in-person hybrid meetings when we can. So anybody who's able to join and take time out of the day on that Friday, we'd love to have you and see you in person in the office. And just as a reminder, for the hybrid meetings, those do typically go until noon. So it will be from 10 to noon on those hybrid meeting days.
Awesome. Any last questions, comments, concerns?
Just kind of want to hold some space for our public comment as well.
Sorry, yes.
No worries. No worries. So at this time, if any member of the public would like to come off mute, if you have a question, comment. All right, Jen, sending it back over to you to close us out then.
All right, if there's no other questions or comments, we will see everybody hopefully in person in a month. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everybody. Have such a great afternoon. Thanks again, Hal. We really appreciate all your feedback on this.
Oh yeah, if you guys have any other questions or it seems like this, I don't want to say stirred up anything, but like, you know, it's a great conversation. There's no
It is
here. And
absolutely.
And so, yeah, if people have more thoughts or stuff, I'd be happy to talk to anyone offline.
Great. Thanks so much, Hal. We'll definitely be in contact, and I'll be reaching out to Judge Leaf to try and get her back
Awesome.
and let you know when she's going to be able to participate. So we can be sure to have you in that room as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.